In this video, I'm going to show you how to check the timing of a Singer Model 327K and its sister machine 328K and 329K. And this check would work on dozens of other vintage Singer sewing machines. And if it is rare in my experience to find the timing off on a machine like this that has a horizontal oscillating hook. I have found a couple, but it is rare, especially compared to a machine with a timing belt. But I will show you how to reset the timing in case you do find that the timing maybe was tampered with by a previous owner or something. And by horizontal rotary hook, I get into some theory here, okay, so that to help you understand this. This is a hook. This is a sewing machine hook. It's not from this machine, but it's just like the one in this machine. And by horizontal, we mean that it sits on a horizontal plane like this in the machine, versus a vertical hook like on a 301 or a 221 featherweight that usually sits down below the front edge of the machine, and I guess on some modern ones it can sit down below on the front of the machine. But this is a horizontal hook, and by oscillating we mean that the hook oscillates at about 90 degrees. So as the machine is running, the hook retreats back behind the needle point. Well, it's in front of the needle, but past, I guess past. And then it stops, and then it advances down to about 6:30 on the clock to cast off the needle thread that it picked up. So that thread can wrap around the bobbin thread and form the lock stitch. So this is the hook, and it's called the hook, and on every hook you will have a point, and it's called the hook point. And the point is the whole point of the hook. That's what this whole hook is for, is to have this little point to capture the needle thread as it passes just behind the needle. On a horizontal rotary hook, it just keeps turning counterclockwise all the time. It's just turning counterclockwise. So when you have like a Rocketeer machine or a Slant-O-Matic, it's just rotating counterclockwise all the time. On a machine like this with an oscillating hook, as I said, the hook retreats the hook point past the needle and then advances counterclockwise down to drop off the thread. A 347, a 457, those would be 513. Those would be some examples of a horizontal rotary hook that use a timing belt and pulleys, and they just rotate. Okay, so when you have your needle bar and needle on it in the machine, the whole idea of timing is that when the hook is advancing counterclockwise, whether it's an oscillating hook or a rotary hook, when it's advancing and the needle is going to be coming up, there's a certain point in this cycle, a certain place, where the point of the hook is behind the needle. to catch the needle thread. And usually it always has to be on the advance of the hook. The hook has to be moving counterclockwise, and it has to be on the upward stroke of the needle bar. So the needle bar is coming up and the hook point is advancing towards it, and there's that magic point where the point of that hook is right behind the needle. And it's usually when the hook point is also about a 1/16 of an inch above the eye of the needle. Okay, so when your timing is spot on, when it's proper, the needle has gone down, bottomed out, it's on the way up, and the hook comes by at that point. When the needle is on the way up and the point is behind the needle at about a 1/16 of an inch above the eye of the needle. Now if your timing is off, the hook point might get there late. The needle is up higher when the hook comes around and it can't grab the thread. If your timing's early, the hook goes by the needle before it's up high enough, and it's ahead of the thread. It can't get the thread because the thread is being held tight by the check spring of the tension unit. So you can have late timing and miss the thread, it went by, or you can have early timing where the hook goes by before the thread loop is there. But that is what timing's all about. And I'd like to show you a picture of a perfectly timed hook point to a needle point I took on another series, but it's a really great close-up shot to show you that relationship better than I can show you with a video. Okay, so let me show you that. Okay, so let's take a look at a machine now. Now, the other part of this is that works with timing is the height of the needle, because remember I said that the hook is going to pass by the needle about a 1/16 of an inch above the eye of the needle, and that's because the thread is going through the eye of the needle and it's pulled up taut in the back as it's trying to form the stitch. And when the needle goes down all the way through your fabric and starts to come up, the check spring has released tension on that needle thread, and the thread kind of drags on the fabric as the needle's coming up, because there's no tension on that thread. And that's where the hook can come by and catch that little tiny loop that forms during the upstroke. So the first part of checking your timing is to check your height of your needle bar, because that is more likely to be off than a hook timing, especially on a machine like this. This oscillating hook doesn't use a belt or a gear. It's got a bell crank system that runs on a pitman rod, and you know, so if you have a timing problem on a machine like this, my experience has been it's more likely the needle bar height. But if you saw my needle bar video, you'll already have a good idea of this, And if you haven't, I'll put a link to it in the description below the video, and on the end slide of the video I'll put a link. So if you've never set the height, you can watch that to be sure your height's okay. But basically, if you may know, there's two timing marks on the needle bar. The top one is for setting the height of the needle bar, and the bottom one is for setting the timing. So when you check the height of a needle bar, you have to turn the hand wheel so the needle bar goes to its lowest point. And I usually just watch the connecting link, but you can watch the needle bar or the needle clamp or whatever works for you, you know. But it's got to be at the lowest point of the whole up and down cycle. And when it is at that point, let me prop up this machine a little bit here. Change the camera view just a little. When it is at that point, what you're going to see is that the top timing mark is way up parallel to the bottom of the needle bar bushing. Now you should see that band, you should see that mark as it's called. And usually, unless you've just cleaned your needle, it'll be kind of black looking from some dried oil in it, in that little groove. But you'll be able to see it, and you should see it way up near here, just about to disappear. So if you see a little sliver of silver needle bar between your top timing mark and the bottom of the bushing, that's what you should see. And if you don't see that, that means that your needle bar height is off. And you definitely would want to reset that before you touched anything with a hook. Okay? So, the other part of this to check the timing now is that you must rotate the hand wheel towards the front of the machine to start the upward stroke of the needle bar, and stop it when the bottom mark is up where the top mark used to be. So it's going to move up, you know, a 1/16 of an inch or so until that bottom timing mark is up parallel with the bushing. And that's called the hook timing mark, or timing mark. And when you've raised that, like that, that is the place that you check. Now to do this, your machine should be set into straight stitch or zero width. Okay? And if you have a machine that has a left center right needle bar locator, left center right lever, like the 328, it should be in the center position. So you want a center position needle bar, and you want a zero width or straight stitch setting. And with that needle bar upstroke stopped right at that lower timing mark, that is where you're going to check to see if now the hook is right behind the needle and just above the eye of the needle. That's what you should see when you look down in there. Okay, so now, of course, I've got to change this because I have to take the needle plate out to look down in there, right? But I wanted to show you that setting. And by the way, Singer recommends you use a number 18 needle. So if you have a number 18 needle, go ahead and put it in. This would be like a heavy duty needle or a jeans needle maybe, or even a leather needle or a top stitch needle. But a 15x1 needle in size 18 is what they recommend. So I'm just going to open the slide plate and I'm going to take off my throat plate or needle plate to give me a view, right? And I'm also want to take out this bobbin case. So I'm going to make sure that my feed dog is up as high as it'll go, and I'm going to lift the positioning bracket up higher than this adjustment screw. There's a little screw back here and a bigger screw, but there's a hole for this bigger screw, so you lift it up and swing it to the right about 1/16 of an inch. So you're moving the positioning bracket and the bobbin case spring, like positioning spring, away from the bobbin case so that you can move the bobbin case to the right off of the race and lift it out of the machine. Okay, and I'll just put that down. I think you can leave it up, but I just put it down. Now if you want, you can take out these two screws back here and remove the feed dog, if that will give you a better view. I usually don't do that. I don't find that it's necessary to do that, but I know that some people do. So I'm just gonna, I haven't restored the machine yet, so I'm just going to get some of the lint and stuff out of here. Some dust elephants, so I can take a look at it. And this is what I meant about the picture being a better view. But I'm going to do this thing where turning the hand wheel toward me, the needle bar comes all the way down, and then I'm going to turn it up until that bottom timing mark is about to disappear in that bushing. And when I look down in here now, I want to see my hook behind the needle. And it is. On this machine it is. And that's probably what you're gonna find. And again, it's the hook is a little bit above the eye of the needle, and that's what I see here. Okay, but again, I think that's what you're going to find. But if you don't, let me set up here and I'll show you how to reset the timing on a oscillating horizontal hook that has a bell crank system. Okay, I have the machine laying on a towel on its back, and I took this nasty old got some rusty and stuff but it's the bottom plate, the bottom cover, the oil pan, some people call it. That needs a little work, but I took that off. It's held on. It was held on with one thumb nut. So however your plate is held on, you're going to need to remove the plate, because on this machine we have to get in here and work on actually this crank over here. This crank is on the bottom of the upright shaft that comes down from the arm above, and up on the top it has a metal gear that meshes with a metal gear on the horizontal arm, And that's what makes this crank go around and around as the machine runs. Okay? So this pitman rod takes that movement over to the bell crank on the hook. Now right there is the bottom of the little hook shaft. That's right there in the center of this bell crank system. And the bell crank is what converts that circular motion here to an oscillating motion here. You watch, this doesn't go around in a circle. It goes one way and then the other, and oscillates back and forth, back and forth. It retreats and advances, retreats and advances. Okay? So I know on some machines, when you have the belt or gears, the belt is done over here. There are some gears that can be done here, but timing is usually over here, because when everything is all connected but the timing's off, you have to break the connection between the upper arm shaft going to the needle bar and this lower stuff that goes to the hook, because you're going to want to set your needle bar at the right place and then manually set the hook to match while this is disconnected. Then when you have it lined up the way it's supposed to be, hook point to needle point, then you reconnect everything back and you have set your timing. So when it is off, you need to go in here into this crank, and there's two pretty good sized set screws, and they're fairly deep down in here. You know, they're not over here on this shallow part of the crank. You see this center part? This is the vertical shaft coming down. Look how big it is. You gotta love these old metal vintage singers. But anyway, they don't put it here because the pitman is already connected over in here. So these set screws are here and here. And there's two of them because there's not a flat spot. Like on this machine I took this hook from, see that flat spot on the shaft? You only need one set screw there to fasten it. But this shaft, and most shafts like it, are just perfectly round. So you kind of need two set screws to pinch it so the shaft won't slip. So you need an Allen wrench. I'm sorry, it's not identified what size it is. The service manual mentions that you use a 1/4 inch socket wrench to do this. I don't have a 1/4 inch socket, but I have an Allen wrench. Okay, so I want to go in and loosen these two, and it's going to, there, see, now I'm down in there all the way, and they can be pretty snug in there. So if you have trouble with it, if you want to squirt a little WD-40, something like that, maybe warm it up with a hair dryer and let it cool down to expand and contract it. But usually if you just keep going, it will break free. Okay, and you don't need much to break it free as far as the set screw. Usually the problem, let me loosen this other one while I'm telling you, usually the problem is in this shaft, the crank's kind of glued to it with old varnished oil and grease. And it's just dried, and it's just got a death grip on that shaft. So let me loosen this one. There. Okay. And to check now, I'm going to turn the hand wheel, which will turn the needle. But if I hold this pitman, it shouldn't move. Oh, look, I can already tell it's nice and loose. See that? And it's nice and loose because I cleaned it yesterday. Because I could not get it off. But anyway, if you want to see if it'll do that, you know you're good. Or otherwise, hold your pitman and turn the hand wheel towards you, and you'll see this shaft rotating, but it won't move this anymore because there. See, I'm moving my needle. You can see the feed dog and all that stuff going, but it doesn't move the pitman or the bell crank because you've separated that connection to the top. Yay, hey. So here's what we do. Well, wait, before I leave this, if this is glued to the shaft like mine was, I took the set screws all the way out. They're about 1/4 inch long. I just twisted until they were loose and took them all the way out, and I sprayed some WD-40 in there and a tiny bit here, but mostly I sprayed it in the holes for the set screw because that'll go right down to the shaft. And then I let it sit for an hour and came back, it was still glued. I sprayed a little more. I let it sit for another hour. I came back, I still couldn't budge it. So I ran the hair dryer on warm for about 5 minutes and I still couldn't budge it. So I ran the hair dryer on hot for about 5 more minutes. And then finally I could hold that pitman in place and turn the hand wheel, and it kind of broke loose. And of course a bunch of WD-40 leaked out, but it was all nice and free. So I'm just warning you, okay? All right, so the thing to do, the way I do it, you can stand up and look down the machine and see the needle and the hook. Some people approach it like from this angle so that they can see the needle and the hook here, and they can make the adjustment. Okay, it's been better for me to get right up and stand and look down dead on that hook and needle. I found when I try approaching from the side or something, what looked good to me after I tightened it and then looked here, I was off. So that's what I do. I'm going to put my needle bar down and then keep turning it, so on the up stroke, that bottom timing mark is up by the bushing. And then I'm going to look here and I'm going to see, yeah, my timing is off. And what I'm going to do is move this crank counterclockwise to get the hook point behind that needle. Okay, so you see how easy it turns now, because you've broken that connection of the set screws. So you can move it very easily, and you want to look down at your needle and hook and rotate this. Usually you're going to go counterclockwise until that hook comes up counterclockwise, which is advancing, right? It's advancing. It has to be on the advanced stroke. The point of the hook has to be advancing towards the needle. It can't be coming back. Like, you'll never hook anything if the point is behind the needle at the backstroke. It's got to be advancing counterclockwise. So if you turn that crank, and when you get that hook point right there behind that needle, so you've got the points together, you need to hold the hook point in place. You need to push down in the center of the hook, or put a couple fingers on the hook and like pull it towards you a little bit so that it doesn't budge, because you need all that point to point to stay there while you come back here and tighten things back up. Right? We got a little play there, but I can feel my hook is not moving. Okay? So I can get to one of these set screws better than the other. So I'm going to tighten that one back up while I'm holding. I should have got a little bit of play there. Better check my needle bar, make sure it's not moving. Okay. I'll have to check my pitman later, because you don't want the hand wheel or needle bar to move up or down, and you want that hook to stay right where you positioned it. And if it's easier for you to get to the other set screw down here, you know, set screws are just not my favorite thing to do, and the Allen wrench always feels like a little awkward and clumsy. See, I'm blaming the wrench instead of blaming my clumsiness, right? Now I've got to be sure that my crank is pushed up to the bushing here. I don't want it to have it slip down and then I'll have play in that. So I want to keep that crank pushed up against the bushing and everything in place as I get in here and tighten. So if I snug one of them up, I can let everything go and rest my fingers now, because that will keep everything in place enough so that I can rotate the hand wheel a little bit and get to a more comfortable working position here to finish righty tighty. Okay, and before I really crank on them now, I'm going to go back to my needle bar and hook, and I'm going to rotate that hook hand wheel up and get my bottom timing mark there, and then I'm going to look down here and I'm going to be sure that I have my hook point right behind that needle, just verifying, because you'll be surprised. You think you're holding it, everything's steady, but it can sneak away on you. So now that I've verified everything, I'm just going to go ahead and move it again to an easier spot, and I'm going to go in and kind of tighten both of these up. Kind of a funny angle here. There. And then I'm going to Tighten that one up good, and then I'm gonna tighten this one a little more. I snugged them up, you know, but now you definitely want them tight. And I don't have any play here. So you push this up. You don't want to jam it full so hard that it binds against the bushing, but you don't want you know, any space between the crank and the bushing, or else that shaft will have play and bop, 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 up and down. Be noisy at the top and bang down here. So now let's go back, and I got everything tightened, and I'm going to check my needle point all the way down, come back up. My hook is advancing now, and there it is, my point. I know you can't see it, that's why I did the picture, but I see that my needle point has the hook point right behind it. With my lower timing mark at the perfect spot. So that is retiming it. And again, I don't think that you're going to find this very often, but if the timing is off, you're not going to sew very well. Now to put your bobbin case back in, I'm going to lift that positioning bracket up again and swing it about 1/16 of an inch over, just to make a little room. Turn my hand wheel so that my feed dog is kind of up from the hook to give me room to get in there. I'm going to put this little fork over the positioning bar that's down there. And usually you have to kind of move it to the right, go in, move it to the right, and then move it left, so that these slots get on the little ledge called the rail down inside the edge of the hook. That's what that bobbin case rides on. So go in there, push it over. I'm going to turn my hand wheel, rotate the hook a little to be sure it's riding sweetly. Then put my positioning bracket back on there. Very nice. And since I've been handling the hook and all that, I'm going to put a drop of oil in the hole in the center of the hook, and a drop of oil right on the edge of the bobbin case and surface of the hook there, so when it retreats back, it glides that oil in there. Sweet. Okay, and then you probably know how to, you just use this to pry up that spring-loaded post. Mine's dirty, so it just stayed up. There we go. Thanks for tuning in on the timing check and setting of this 327 Singer Spartan version. I hope that was interesting, and I really hope you never have to retime the hook, but if you do, you can save a machine by doing that. And you can often find machines for sale because they won't sew, and if you put the check those two timing marks and you see the timing's off, you know, give them $10 for it and come home and reset the timing, and you might have yourself a very nice machine. That's it. Come back and see me next time, okay? I always appreciate you viewing, and you're welcome to leave comments and ask questions. I try to respond to all that in my email. Take care.